Welcome to my video on Amur Oblast as part of my series on the Russian subdivisions. So, for our basics, it has a population of around 800,000, so that places around 60th of the roughly 90 subdivisions within Russia. However, in area, it is actually 14th, with around 362,000 square kilometers. Its capital and largest city is Blagoveshchensk, is how I believe it is pronounced, with around 241,000 people living there. So quite a large population lives in the capital there. And it borders Zabaikalsky Krai, Sakha Republic to the north, Khabarovsk Krai, and the Jewish Autonomous Oblast, and then of course China to the south. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of people live in cities, so this oblast is 68% urban and 32% rural. And over here, I have my Jewish Autonomous Oblast mentioned sticker, so we're probably going to be doing this for Tuva and JAO. Maybe we'll be doing it for Kaliningrad, if for any subdivisions that border Kaliningrad. But yeah, so let's get on with it. In terms of history, so this was populated by the Dowers and Duchers. Hopefully I'm not mispronouncing that too badly. But basically these were kind of the Central Asian nomads, kind of similar to Mongols or some of the Zhungars in Western China. But it was actually taken by another nomadic dynasty to a degree by the Manchus in 1640, and it was originally recognized as Chinese at the Treaty of Nerchinsk, which was negotiated in far eastern Russia and is kind of the first treaty that kind of delineated Russia and China's borders. However, the second major treaty, or kind of the there are only two major treaties here. The second one, which is at Aigun, which is kind of a taking advantage of the Opium Wars and China's Century of Humiliation. So Russia was given this territory for the Amur Oblast. And the small Russian population, which had begun a few years earlier, I believe Blagoveshchensk was founded in 1852, so 6 years beforehand. But it would very much become Russified from then on, with kind of the small population at the start really just being overtaken by all these Russian migrants. Speaking of migrants, probably the biggest reason for a lot of these early migration was the Trans-Siberian Railway, as it moved through parts of the Amur Oblast, and a lot of towns started cropping up, being built, every not couple of miles, because it's Russia, so it's very large, so a good amount of miles apart, but there were a lot of towns which were being built up. And so technically this region was part of the Far Eastern Republic, which was its own nominally independent state from 1920 to 1922. It was basically just a Russian puppet state, kind of a cordon sanitaire, shall we say, between Russia, or the Soviet Union, and China, and also Japan at the time, which was actually probably the bigger threat to the Soviets, but it would eventually just be kind of enveloped into the USSR. It became its own full region in 1948 as part of subdivision reform, and really what's kind of the second growth period here is the Baikal-Amur main line being built partially through the Amur Oblast, with its main station being at Tinda, which is towards the north of the oblast, and it is quite a major city. I believe the photo we have on the top right over there is going to be of Tinda, and then below that is a BAM poster because all of them go so hard. They look amazing. If you ever want to see some pretty good Soviet art, some of the BAM posters are pretty good. So geography. The main mountain range is the Stanovoy Range, which is kind of moves somewhat up from the south. It it is mostly, I believe, contained within the Amur Oblast, so it's not it's mostly self-contained. But it has many of these Golets type mountains, which I will try to highlight here. So as you can see, they're bald mountains, so no vegetation really, especially no trees. They're very rocky too. I believe that's kind of what makes them their own type of bald mountains. So as you can see, there's these rocky kind of peaks that are dotted throughout this mountain range, which I think is actually quite interesting and kind of cool. There's this own type of mountain, maybe not for the oblast, but it's its own little geologic formation. Kind of obviously, the main river is the Amur, which is partially shared with, or is almost fully shared with China, I believe. However, there are some other smaller rivers. They're not necessarily important within the oblast, but they flow into larger rivers in the north, and they do also provide a lot of hydropower for the oblast, which I believe makes up almost all of the power there. The largest body of water, I believe, is the Zaya Reservoir, which is man-made, powers the Zaya, or sorry, supplies the Zaya Dam, and there are a lot of reserves of minerals, but they're only partially exploited, and they're still around 400 billion in dollars, which are still estimated to be in the reserves of Amur Oblast. The temperatures can vary a huge amount from an average of -20, I believe, Fahrenheit, to 65 Fahrenheit in July, which is having an 85-degree average range can be quite interesting. Although I think it also depends on whether you're in the north or the south of the oblast. So, like I said, it's basically entirely Russified. 95% Russian. Well, there's kind of some of those other smaller ethnic groups you expect to see within Russia there too. Ukrainians, Azerbaijanis, Tatars. I believe there's some Armenians too. It's just kind of what you expect, like a Russified territory to be within Russia. The population has been decreasing since the 1989 census, which was the last one done in the USSR. And it's declined by about 250,000. So it's partially due to lack of opportunities. I mean, just not necessarily good jobs. I mean, and then also kind of just how much the construction of the BAM inflated it. Also, the Soviets kind of being a bit more controlling over where you could live and stuff. So there are several different factors that go into this, but it's the far east of Russia. I mean, it's gonna be like that no matter what, I'm pretty sure. The Oblast is 25% Orthodox, 41% spiritual but not religious, which is kind of in accordance with a lot of Russia, and 23.6 atheist. So really, this is kind of what you tend to expect within a lot of Russia, and I think it's pretty standard for one of these Russified subdivisions. It's mostly Siberian Russian in terms of its culture, and a lot of the nomadic cultures, either the Manchus or the Dowers or the Juchers, it has just been lost. I believe so. Up here is just an Orthodox church within the oblast. Then down here, I believe this is the city of Hehe, which I probably terribly mispronounced there, which is in China. That is just south of Blagoveshchensk. So here's another piece of history right here. We have Green Ukraine, which was a proposed state within Far Eastern Russia. It was kind of supposed to be a Ukrainian nation state, but it doesn't really make a lot of sense. It's quite interesting to learn about. It wasn't really a actual thing there. As you can see, we have Blagoveshchensk. Sorry, mispronounced that. But here within Amur Oblast. And it's really interesting. If you want to learn more, I'd recommend Ghost Countries has a pretty good video about it. He goes more into like the ideas of it, the politics, and it's actually a pretty interesting thing to learn about. Really, because of the Kolchak armies and the White armies retreat through to Vladivostok down here in the south, this idea was kind of scrapped, and then of course the Soviets were not going to have it, and instead they opted for the Far Eastern Republic, which you can see is the left of our flags down there, and then the proposed Green Ukraine flag is to the right. So, Blagoveshchensk. It was established in 1856, so 2 years before the region was formally ceded to Russia, and it grew a lot during the late 1800s, which even Prince Nicholas, future Tsar Nicholas, may he rest in hell, he visited the city on his tour of the Russian Far East. The city was actually, interestingly, attacked by the Boxers in 1900, and this is the reason that the area is 95% Russian, because there was a significant Chinese population within the area beforehand, but there was a ethnic cleansing / pogrom which took place against any Chinese people within Blagoveshchensk, where they were drowned, shot, kicked out at best, and certainly a dark period within the time. And during the Civil War, the city was occupied by the Japanese, like several parts of the Russian Far East. Of course, afterward, when it was kind of incorporated into the Far Eastern Republic, it was given back there, and then the Soviets took it over. It's across from the Chinese city of Hehe, which I mentioned earlier. Sorry for the pronunciation there, but both the Trans-Siberian Railway and Trans-Siberian Highway have a spur to the city, which is actually quite important because it facilitates trade with China through Hehe, with a newly constructed bridge. I believe it was done in 2016, I want to say. So it allows for a lot of commerce and trade to flow in, not only from China, but also from a lot of East Asia, like Vietnam, the Philippines, which are able to ship goods to Blagoveshchensk and therefore parts of the Far East from there. And it's interestingly kind of at a point between the confluence of the Zaya and Amur rivers. So the Zaya then flows north from there, and then the Amur kind of heads on a lateral path from Blagoveshchensk. So, in terms of politics and economy, the current governor of the oblast is Vasily Orlov, unsurprisingly from United Russia. I mean, where else? He's kind of been an enforcer from Putin, and to the point that he actually was sanctioned by the West, partially, I believe, for his recruitment for the Ukrainian war, in terms of trying to get people to sign up to die there, basically. And he is, at least I believe, a local, but he's kind of just been sold out to the Kremlin. So the 2007 GDP per capita, which is, of course, not the most up to date, but it's the newest I believe I could find. It was 130,000 rubles compared to the 200,000 rubles, average countrywide. So certainly it's lagging behind by quite a bit. I believe 35%. Yeah, 35% off the average there. So it might have gotten a bit better if what I'm going to mention next affected that GDP. So the Vostochny Cosmodrome was constructed during the 2010s. It was partially helpful to development. I mean, it was somewhat self-contained in terms of the project. Besides people being involved in construction, a lot of, as you can imagine, a lot of the really skilled labor that would be working there kind of has to be imported from a lot of the rest of Russia. And then, of course, we're talking about Russian construction. There was a lot of corruption involved with the procurement for construction materials, and then also the construction itself. I mean, workers were not paid, I believe, too, for a certain amount of time, and they eventually protested, I believe. So, yeah, a lot of issues there. The two, I believe, biggest contributors to the economy are manufacturing and mining. I mean, for at least the first and second sector. And then services, of course, also quite important given the development of the Oblast. And interestingly, it's a center of soy production in Russia. I think it's always kind of cool when you learn about these, what these places are kind of known for in terms of products. Like, if you remember my video about Adygea, how it's a center for sunflower production within Russia. So it's kind of cool to learn about those little, specialties or local things. And as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of trade with China that moves through the province, connecting up with the Trans-Siberian Railway, Trans-Siberian Highway. So it's certainly not doing the best, but I mean, it's the Russian Far East. I mean, we can't really expect the best from it, I feel like. All right. So, in terms of our flag here, I think it's all right, but it's just like, come on, bro. Did you have to steal the Latvian SSR flag here? They just removed the hammer and sickle and two of these lines, and they just said, okay, this is our flag now. Like, they have so many, at this point, just at least do the boring Americans, local flag where it's like, oh, we added a mountain or something. They could add one of those Golets type peaks or something like that. It would be way better than whatever they have going on right here. But I mean, yeah, for those reasons, I'm gonna put it in the C tier here. And yeah, that's basically my thought when I saw this flag for the first time. So here's our anthem. It's quite interesting. It almost sounds like kind of a pop song to a degree. It's like kind of a dance song. I don't know if it's just this kind I mean, that's pretty unique too. I have to give it to them. I think it actually kind of has like kind of funny, you know? So I'm gonna put in the A tier for our anthem. And honestly, if they just do the remix, you know, Let's Call It or something like that, I think it's cool. I genuinely think they could do that. But for now, I think that's it. And other videos within my series, before I head out on I might be doing some stuff about that. Hopefully I can get some there. Otherwise, I think that's it for today. Thank you for watching.